Hi, I'm Lou Pamonti, and this is Music from the Inside, another chapter in our Showbiz Anecdotes series. Leonard Cohen. I met and worked with a lot of very interesting people during my tenure as the musical director for the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame show. In 2006, we inducted Leonard. And we did the show, and it was fabulous. We had a bunch of great guests come on. We had Katie Lang sing Hallelujah for him, which was a showstopper. We had Rufus Wainwright come in and sing a couple of tunes. It was great. Anyways, about 3 weeks after the show, I get a phone call from Sony Music Canada. And I think Lisa was the head of Sony at that time. And she called me and she said, Leonard and his girlfriend/wife, Angenie, are about to embark on a short European tour. Leonard has just produced Angenie's newest record, and the two of them will be going out, and they would like to go out with a small band, and they enjoyed your work on the Songwriter Show. And Leonard said, ask Lou if he would like to put together a band for me. I, of course, said yes. We ended up going with just piano, guitar, and bass. When we went to rehearsal with the drummer, Leonard was just like, oh, it's too much. So no drummer. So just piano, guitar, bass, and Leonard and Angenie. Now, we went to Norway. We went to London, England. We went on about a 2-week trip through Europe, and it was a very kind of a quiet show, but it rustled up an enormous amount of press. First of all, because Leonard is enormously big in Europe, and especially Poland, which we played in Warsaw. Someone told me there he's like the Beatles in Poland. So there were paparazzi when we showed up in Poland and off the airport. And anyways, to make a long story short, we did our dates, and it was fabulous. And I got to know Leonard very well. So our final date of the tour was back in Montreal, which is Leonard's hometown. And so we played our show, and then Leonard said, listen, why doesn't everybody come back? I've always had a house in Montreal, in Portugal Square. He told me that in the 70s, he had bought 3 row houses right next to each other in Portugal Square. And he kept one, rents one out, and gave one to the Buddhist monks, of which, if you know Leonard's past, he considers himself a Buddhist, and he lived in a monastery, I think, for a couple of years and shut off from normal society. So anyways, we said, of course, we'd love to. So we finished the show. We don't, because of all the press and all that stuff after the show, we don't really get back to Leonard's place until about midnight. And there's about 15 people. So you got to see this place because it's like a time warp. It's like frozen in time. So if he bought these in the early 70s, that's exactly what it looked like inside. The furniture, the old appliances, very aesthetic, very little art on the walls, very little furniture, certainly not cozy. So anyways, me and Scott Alexander, our bass player, were sitting in Leonard's kitchen. Now you got to understand, it's like, one of those Micmac, tables, Formica tables with the metal chairs, and yet the appliances from the 50s and the 60s and stuff. And anyways, we're sitting there and we're drinking wine. We're drinking red wine. And Leonard is telling us stories about how his father used to work in the shipyards in Montreal and how he used to love to go down to the shipyards with his father. And he would show him how everything worked. And so he wanted to own a house in Montreal. So at about 2:00 in the morning, Leonard goes, geez, I'm kind of hungry. I could really go for a smoked meat sandwich. And I said, a smoked meat sandwich? He said, I thought you were a Buddhist. And he said, well, when it's appropriate. Leonard is like James Taylor in that way. If it's quiet enough, he has a devastatingly funny, subtle sense of humor. So Leonard says, Lou, would you go down to the Main Street Deli and ask for a guy named Peter and get us 4 smoked meat sandwiches and tell him that Leonard Cohen sent you. I said, will do. Me and Scott Alexander, we hop in a cab. We go down to the Main Street Deli. It's not that far away. And I go in there. It's just like 2:30 in the morning. I ask for Peter, and this big dude comes out with a white apron with blood all over it. I said, are you Peter? And he goes, yeah. I said, Leonard Cohen sent me. And he goes, Leonard Cohen. He goes, Leonard Cohen, the tailor from just down here? And I go, no. He goes, oh, Lenny Cohen, the lawyer from just over there? And I go, No. I said, Leonard Cohen, the songwriter. And he went, I don't know. There's a lot of Leonard Cohens around here. So anyways, we order the sandwiches and I say, and would you do me a favor? Give me a whole brisket. I'm flying home in the morning. Put a whole brisket in there for me too. Okay. We get the stuff, get in the cab. We go back to Leonard's place. I show up, put the sandwiches on the table, and I say to Leonard, Leonard, I bought a brisket for me to take home on the plane tomorrow morning. Don't let me forget it. I'm going to put it in your fridge. He says, I won't. I'll remind you to take it. Okay, so we stay up eating smoked meat sandwiches and red wine with my Buddhist friend. And 4 o'clock, we're ready to go because I say, look, man, it's like I got to be at the airport at like 7:30. So I think we'd better go. We get in the cab. I'm halfway back to the hotel and I realize I've left my brisket in Leonard's fridge. I call him on the phone. I said, Leonard, you said you wouldn't let me forget my brisket. And he goes, oh, geez. He says, that's terrible. He says, what time is your flight in the morning? I said, well, I got to be at the airport by 7:30. So I got to be in the cab by 7 o'clock. He says, that's no problem. Now, this is in 3 hours, right? He says, that's no problem. He says, I barely sleep. He said, just come by in the cab on your way to the airport, pick up the brisket, I'll be up. I said, are you sure? He goes, yeah, fine. Okay. I go to sleep for 2.5 hours. I wake up, get in the cab, say, we got to stop at Portugal Square first. He's driving down Portugal Square. And as he's driving down Portugal Square, I see Leonard Cohen in the dim morning light, standing there in a suit and a fedora, holding my brisket. So we pull up alongside. I go, Leonard. He goes, here's your brisket. He says, I'm sorry that I didn't remember to give it to you. I said, oh, I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough. We leave, and as the cab is pulling away and I look away at 7 o'clock in the morning in the misty light, there's Leonard Cohen in a fedora and his suit waving goodbye to me. And that's the last time I saw Leonard Cohen. He didn't live much longer after that. More to come.